Okay, so this is the Belorusky Vokzal, the Belarusian train station. This is where you end up if you take the Aero Express train from the airport. So I've landed at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport, something like that, which is by far the busiest airport in Moscow. Moscow is actually served by no less than 4 international airports. But the biggest one by far in terms of number of passengers flown per year is Sheremetyevo. Or I think I'm getting the name slightly wrong, but it's close to that. So best way to get here into the city from the airport is probably to take one of these so-called Aero Express trains. This sign actually doesn't mention it for some reason, but yeah, the Aero Express train costs... What did it cost? I think it cost 500 rubles, which is something like, let's say it's about 10 bucks, something close to that, approximately. And yeah, it goes from the airport to here in about a little over half an hour train ride. So not bad, not too bad. First impressions are good. I did want to film some of the airport itself, but unfortunately, there wasn't really much to see there. Like, the airport itself isn't really that impressive. It's kind of like, you know, I mean, it's just an airport. There's not really anything there. It's not really anything definitive that that really stands out for me. One thing that I need to get used to is there are a lot of uniformed security guards in Russia. Like these 2 guys standing there. There's another one standing over there. Another one just walked by me in that direction. This is just a normal thing in Russia, especially in train stations and things like that. There are a lot of guys in uniforms who are either police or just general security. Like, these guys are rail security, which makes sense because there are security concerns. There have been terrorist bombings of train stations in Russia in past years, caused by various terrorist groups, often by the Chechens, for example, and so for that reason the security presence here is a little bit more than what you'd probably get in other typical European countries. So here's a sign telling you where you can find different things. So yeah, so there's the sign mentioning the Aero Express. That's the train that I took to get here. Suburban tickets, I guess that's probably for the Elektrichka trains, which is like, yeah, suburban commuter trains. And then the metro, if you want to get on the metro, there is also a metro station not too far from here. So I guess I will probably get on the metro and see where things go from there. So yeah, this is my first vision of Moscow ever. It's a little underwhelming possibly, but I mean, hey, it could be a lot worse, right? So this is the metro station attached to the Belorusky Vokzal, where I just was. So I went down to the metro, and here it is. As is typical of Russian metro stations, it looks really nice. I mean, the architecture and everything looks really nice inside, but I hardly ever have time to notice how nice these metro stations look because they're always so full of people. There are so many people going around and trains going around, and people are always in such a hurry that you don't really notice the carvings and things and how nice they look. But this is quite a nice looking metro, I have to say. So I rode just 2 station stops on the metro, and I chose to get out here for a second. This is Kievskaya station. I guess it's attached to the Kiev long-distance train station. So this is a metro station. This is an underground station for people who take local suburban trains. But it's attached to a long-distance train station for, I guess, trains that go to Kiev, Ukraine. I have to say, the metro stations here in Moscow are definitely more impressive than the ones in St. Petersburg. So St. Petersburg is known for having a nice looking metro. The metro stations there are quite impressive, but the ones here are actually like on a whole other level. Moscow has one of the most beautiful metro underground transit systems in the world. So I just rather spontaneously came upon this big church. It's actually very difficult to... I have to try and look at this from farther away. It's actually very difficult to really see it properly when you're close up to it like this because there's this huge fence in the way, and the face of the building is fairly unimpressive if you're just right next to it like this. I should actually try to get a shot of that when I'm farther away. So I have achieved one of my first goals, which is to get a map of the city, which has an all-important, this all-important map of the metro system on the back of it. This may look familiar for those of you who have played Metro 2033, or some of its sequels. But I have set out for myself the insane task of trying to walk from here to Red Square. It's really not that far. It seems far because I came here with the Metro, and it seems like, yeah. So here you can see a nice entryway into that church there, and kind of see the tower going up. But you still don't really see much when it's close up. You have to kind of get farther away. So I think Red Square is not really that far. It's maybe like a couple of kilometers, but that's something that a normal person can walk in about half an hour. I don't know what this is, but it seems like a nice little courtyard. Okay, so first impressions of Moscow. Let me go ahead and just give my first impressions now, having come here with the Metro. I'm not quite sure what I expected. For some reason, I had this fear. Maybe fear is the wrong word. Not exactly a fear, but like an inkling that maybe Moscow would be just like St. Petersburg, except bigger. Because I really did not perceive. I mean, I read up a lot about St. Petersburg. I wondered for a moment if that bird was real. There's a bird perched on the top of the guy's head, and for a moment I thought, is that bird real or is it part of the statue? But it's real. It's a real bird. This is Nikolai Ernstovich Baumann. So that's interesting. Baumann is a German surname, so he has a German surname, but I guess that's not that uncommon. I guess it's not really uncommon for Russians to have German last names. Anyway, I probably shouldn't stop to film every little statue and thing like that. It's going to take forever. I mean, Moscow is a huge city. Obviously, Moscow is a huge city. I'm only here for about 4 days. Obviously, it's impossible to see everything in 4 days. So I'm not going to try and film every little thing. And that's not really the point anyway. I mean, my goal here is not to film every possible tourist attraction in Moscow, because there are other places you can get that. This is more like a very personal account of my own personal experiences in Moscow. Man, all these tulips. This is actually, I mean, it's a small little tulip garden in the middle of this park here, but it's actually quite nice. And this one is taking a selfie of herself in front of the tulips, and why not? It's actually a very nice park. Russians really do good parks. They're good at grandiose parks. That's something that Russians do well that a lot of European countries don't do as well. So first impressions of Moscow. It's a lot happier than I expected it to be. Like I said, for some reason I had sort of this idea in the back of my mind that maybe Moscow would be kind of like St. Petersburg, except just bigger, like a bigger version of St. Petersburg. But it's not just bigger, and you know what? It doesn't even feel that much bigger. You know, when I was I often think of the time when I was in the West Edmonton Mall in Edmonton, Canada, which at that time was the world's largest mall. And you might think it's kind of cool to be in the world's largest mall, but the thing is, when you're there, you don't really feel the size. You don't feel like you're in a huge mall because, you know, you don't see the whole mall all at once. Maybe if you could somehow zoom out and see the thing from a distance. Speaking of seeing from a distance, I forgot about that church back there. You can't really see the church too well now because it's behind those trees, but that's the church that I was at before. You know, when you're in the mall, you don't really feel how huge it is. If you could zoom out and look at the map, like if you could look at a map of the mall, maybe then, sure, you might see it's that the plan of it, like the blueprint of it or whatever, is bigger than other malls. But when you're in it, you don't see the whole thing. You only see like a few stores in each direction, so you don't feel how much bigger it is. Moscow is kind of the same. I mean, it is obviously, I know factually, I know that it is larger than Petersburg, quite significantly. I think SPB is about 5 million people and Moscow is what, 13 million, something like that. So this city is more than twice the size of St. Petersburg, but you don't feel it when you're here. Like, I don't feel that this city is palpably larger than St. Petersburg. That said, I've not been to Red Square. Like, I've not really been to the proper city center yet. This is not quite the center. This is sort of on the outskirts of the city, so maybe that has something to do with it. But a lot of the problems that people told me I would see in Moscow, I'm just not really seeing. I mean, traffic. Okay, there is traffic, but what I've seen, I mean, admittedly, I haven't seen that much yet, but I would not place Moscow's traffic as any worse than St. Petersburg's traffic. I mean, yeah, there's traffic here, but I mean, look at this. You got a big wide open street with no traffic on it. Wow, look at that huge building back there. What is that? So I'm trying to cross the street and zoom in on that at the same time. Is that Hotel Ukraine? I think there's a Hotel Ukraine here, which is like the tallest hotel in Europe or something like that. That might be it. I don't know. It looks a little like that, I think. Okay, so, oh man, I'm just a little overwhelmed because there's obviously so much going on here. I've only seen a small portion of the city, and already I'm just realizing how big of a task I have ahead of me trying to see the city in 4 days. It's impossible. I'm just going to try and do the best I can, but I know I'm going to miss so much. I'm also a little exhausted because I only slept 2 hours last night because I had to get up really super early to go to the airport and catch my flight here. Anyway, excuse me, sorry. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, at least here, I wouldn't put the traffic. I mean, this is rush hour too. What time do we have? I don't have a clock on me. I think this is like 5 p.m. I think this is between 5 and 6 p.m. This is the afternoon rush hour. And it's Monday. Today's Monday. It's not like a weekend. This is afternoon rush hour on a Monday, and there's where's the traffic? I mean, I don't see this traffic that people were telling me you're going to see in Moscow. I'm just not seeing horrible Moscow traffic. Okay, I realize in some places it's probably more piled up. I realize that on the highway, like on the commuter highways in and out of the city, there's probably more traffic there. I get that, okay. I'm sure there are places with more traffic. But if there are just a few places, if the city just has like a few, kind of choke points where traffic congests and piles up, that doesn't seem too bad to me. When I'm walking around, I've seen a few different city squares already, and I'm just not seeing this traffic that people told me I would see. And dirt. People said that there's filth all over the streets. Okay, here there's some junk on the sidewalk, but mostly Moscow's pretty clean. I mean, it's not as dirty as people were telling me it would be. I don't perceive Moscow as a very dirty city, not dirtier than St. Petersburg. I mean, I've seen... Okay, I mean, stuff like this is a little dirty. Yeah, stuff like that's a little bit dirty, but I mean, you see stuff like that in German cities. German cities like Hamburg, Hanover, places like that also have places like that with graffiti and broken down siding and things, so it's not like... this is not significantly worse than what I've seen in many Central European cities. So, I'm not seeing the problems that people told me I would see. And in terms of other impressions, I have to say I'm really shocked by how happy a place Moscow seems. I was expecting it to be super depressing, because St. Petersburg is a pretty sad city. One of my friends from St. Petersburg once described it as the saddest city in the world. Okay, it's maybe not the saddest city in the world, that might be an exaggeration, but it is kind of a depressing city. The mood there is always kind of gloomy, which, is not necessarily bad if you're into that kind of thing. I mean, I grew up in a Finnish family, so I'm kind of used to that, but yeah, see, there you go. It is 5:20 p.m. This is 5:20 p.m. rush hour traffic in Moscow, people. I mean, where's the... Okay, here on this street there's a little traffic because it's a red light. When you have a red light, yeah, some of the traffic might pile up for a bit because you have a red light, but I mean, it's just not... This is just not what I call heavy traffic. I mean, again, I think St. Petersburg has markedly worse traffic than this at rush hour. Anyway, okay, so yeah, Moscow's actually a fairly happy city. I was in the metro, and as I was riding in the metro, I was looking at the advertisements on the side of on the sides of the rail cars, on the side of the subway cars, and usually it's just advertising. Usually it's places saying, buy your groceries here, save 20% off, like Dixie. Dixie is a supermarket chain that's also present in St. Petersburg. And that's like one of those places where they say, hey, shop here, you can save money. It's cool because you pay less money for your groceries and stuff. But in the metro here, as I was riding here, they had like volunteer placards. They were saying, hey, do you want to volunteer? You can go to this website and you can volunteer for a good cause. And they were showing people who were planting trees. They were saying, like, here's people who want to plant a whole forest. These people want to plant a whole forest. They're planting like ridiculous numbers of trees. You want to take part? Go to this website. You can join in. You can plant a forest with these people. I mean, I never saw that kind of activism, that kind of grassroots social activism in St. Petersburg. So it's really stunning to me. I mean, I've always perceived Russia as a very sad place because of my experiences in St. Petersburg, and I mean, I guess it is to some degree, but Moscow is a lot happier than I was expecting it to be. I mean, people here, they're kind of, and people are very friendly. Like, I am amazed. One thing that amazes me is how little people speak English even here. I thought that more people would speak English in Moscow because, it's a more international city. But even at the airport, like when I landed at the airport, I wanted to get some food. So I went up to some little restaurant in the airport and asked the woman there, do you speak English? And she responded to me in Russian. She said, well, just try saying something and see if I understand. And I did, and I don't think she understood, so I tried to speak to her in Russian with my broken Russian. I really don't speak Russian well at all. Like, I really, really, really am feeling the inadequacy of my Russian here. And yet people are so patient with it. Like, when I was in St. Petersburg and I was trying to communicate with people in Russian, they would throw up their hands and say, man, I can't deal with this. This guy doesn't speak Russian. I don't have the patience to try and sit through this guy stuttering his way through a sentence. Okay, a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that my Russian is better now than it was then. I've learned some Russian since I was in St. Petersburg last, and so, yeah, I guess my Russian is better. And that definitely contributes to how patient people are willing to be as I try to speak Russian to them. Those two women were both wearing shirts that said in English, save water, drink wine. Kind of funny. So, yeah, I mean, my Russian has definitely improved since I was last in St. Petersburg, which was like 7 years ago. So I guess that helps. But people here are so friendly, like, they don't get upset if I don't understand. Like, they try to say something to me, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I don't understand, I don't speak Russian very well. And they don't get frustrated. They're so patient. They're so patient. They just they try to explain as simply as they can. This is a supermarket I've not seen before. So, supermarket chains that I know from St. Petersburg include Dixie, which we saw back there. Perekrestok is a popular, well-known one. Azbuka Vkusa. This is a supermarket, judging by the word supermarket there. And it's a 24-hour supermarket. Man, this is something that that is something that I always appreciate about Russia. The fact that a lot of places here are open 24 hours a day. I mean, being in Germany, man, I mean, Germany's great. Don't get me wrong, I love a lot of things about Germany, but the way that everything closes in Germany at 8 p.m., the way that everything, like every supermarket, every store is closed after 8 p.m., it's just so annoying. Here, they have a lot of supermarkets that are 24 hours. They have, oh wow, they have They have Euro Spar here. So Spar is a Dutch supermarket, and this one's also 24 hours. Man, they've got a 24-hour Euro Spar here. You can buy like every imaginable type of food. Okay, maybe not every imaginable type of food, but like every major type of food that you could want on short notice for your house. Here, 24 hours a day. Man, that's so awesome. I don't know what this tractor guy is doing. That word there says water. That blue text says water, so I'm going to assume that's a water tank. I don't know what he's doing with the water, but okay. So parking here is 60 rubles per hour, that says. Oh, and if you don't have a proper parking permit, then it's 2,500 rubles penalty. That's kind of funny. The word for a penalty is Straf, the same as in German. It's the same word in German. That's kind of funny. Anyway, actually, Russian does borrow a lot of words from German. It borrows a lot of words from German and French and Latin and also English these days. Oh man, I feel like I have so much to say and I keep getting distracted by little things. Yeah, people here are so friendly. They're so patient. I did not expect that. Usually, you know, in a big city, usually the bigger the city, the more impatient people are, because they're like, they have to deal with people all day and they don't have time. They don't have time or patience for your nonsense. They don't have time to like wait for you to blab and talk about your day. They just want to get on with their business. But not here. Moscow is the second largest city in Europe, second only to Istanbul. Okay, I've never been to Istanbul. I don't know what it's like there, but this is the second largest city in Europe, and people here are so friendly, and it's so open. Like, I mean, I don't perceive there being a huge lot of traffic here. I don't perceive there being like huge traffic problems in most of the city. Like I said, maybe there are some choke points where traffic gets congested because of how traffic routes. But here, I mean, it's so peaceful. It's so pleasant here, and it's not at all dirty. It doesn't look poor. It doesn't look run down, and it feels safe. You know, like sometimes you go to a place and you kind of feel like it's a little seedy, like there are hoodlums, like you know, petty criminals going around. I'm sure they exist here. I mean, I'm sure there are people here who will pick your pocket, try to pick your wallet out of your pocket or something like that, or, you know, pick some cash or whatever. I mean, I'm sure that exists here, but I don't feel like this place is unsafe, and I feel like people have a really strong social conscience here. Like, people here, one thing you have to say about the Russians, one thing that I really appreciate about the Russians, they do have a very strong social conscience. That guy is running a red light. I talk about people having a social conscience as this guy blocks the crosswalk as I'm trying to cross the street. I mean, he didn't run the red light, but he ran right into the crosswalk, even though he saw that somebody was about to cross the street. Okay, maybe some people don't have such a social conscience, but most people here, I get the impression that people here really do. You know, there's this stereotype that Russians are very selfish, that they don't think about other people. They're just kind of they're inconsiderate. But I don't get that here at all. I mean, seriously, I really feel like people here are very. Hold on, I don't want to push through a bus stop. There's this bus stop here, and a bunch of people got on and off. I really feel like people here are very considerate of each other. Like, they're really, when they talk to me, they try to anticipate what problems I might have. They try to give me advice on where to go, what to do, and they're really, like, they take the time to explain things to you. It's so nice. Not that people in St. Petersburg aren't that way. I mean, people in St. Petersburg are also pretty friendly. But I was expecting it here. I was expecting Muscovites to be a lot less friendly, but they're not. They're so nice. They have such a strong sense of community here. It's really nice. Anyway, so yeah. So Moscow. I mean, the thing about Moscow and St. Petersburg is they're both global cities, but they're global in different ways. Moscow is a global city because it's the capital and the largest city. St. Petersburg is a global city because of its geography. And people in St. Petersburg, people who live in St. Petersburg will often tell you, or at least they often told me, that St. Petersburg is more Western. It's a more European city than Moscow, because it's geographically, it's proximal to Europe. I mean, it's not far from the border with Finland, and so actually, Vyborg, which is a city very close to St. Petersburg, used to belong to Finland. It's a nice church. So, people from St. Petersburg always told me Petersburg is more Western, it's more cosmopolitan because it's close to Europe, and Moscow is a little more isolated and more Russian. But being here, I get the opposite impression. A lot of stuff here in Moscow is in English. Like even on the metro, when I was riding the metro, a lot of the announcements on the train were in English. I mean, they said the announcements first in Russian, then they repeated them in English. That is not something that they did in St. Petersburg. I remember once in St. Petersburg for 1 week, because there was like International Week going on in St. Petersburg or something like that, they introduced, just for that week, they introduced English announcements on the St. Petersburg metro. So people, when you heard an announcement in Russian, then it would be repeated in English. And people rejected it. People said, what country do you think we're in? We're in a Russian-speaking country. Why are you doing English language announcements on a Russian metro system? But here, on the Moscow metro, a lot of announcements are in English. And nobody seems to mind. So, gosh, Moscow seems a lot more cosmopolitan, a lot more open to the world as compared to St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is more isolated, even though it's close to the border with Finland. It's a more staunchly Russian city. At least that's my impression. I mean, that's my impression from what I've seen so far. Okay. I've been talking for quite a while. I think that's all I have to say right now. So I'm going to go ahead and pause to look at this church for a second. I'm going to keep walking. I'm going to see where I am because I haven't really been keeping track of where I've been going. So I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to stop the video for a second and get my bearings and walk for a bit and see what else I can find. So here's something that I just bought from the supermarket. I was thirsty, so I bought 2 things from the supermarket. One is just a regular carton of milk, 1.5% milk, 1 liter, and the other is this kind of thing that you would more typically associate with health food kind of stores. Now, you can't always get this stuff in Russia. It's not rare, it's not hard to find, but this cost almost 300 rubles. That's about, let's say about $5. That is expensive for something like this, especially when you consider what people typically earn in Russia. $5 for a bottle of fruit juice like this is expensive. That is not something I would pay every day, but I'm only here in Moscow for a few days, so as kind of a special occasion, I'll try it out. And this milk, I assume, is just regular milk. This milk cost something like 120 rubles, so about $2, which is also quite expensive for just a regular carton, 1 liter carton of milk. That said, of course, I bought them here from this Azbuka Vkusa, so I assume you can find similar stuff cheaper somewhere else, but specialty stuff like this is expensive because it's developed for rich people. Regular people who don't have a lot of money will not go to the supermarket and buy a bottle of Naked not as a regular thing, not as an everyday thing. They will probably cook at home. They'll probably just buy some cabbage and potatoes and cook it up at home. So this kind of stuff is available. It's readily available in Moscow and also in St. Petersburg, but it is expensive enough to be out of the reach of the average person who's not in a high-paying job. While I'm here, I might as well just take a moment to appease all the Doom fans watching and point out that there is in fact a bank in Russia called BFG Credit. The BFG Credit Bank, that is an actual bank. here there appears to be a skate park. This is actually an interesting little the sign here identifies this as the Caesar Kunikov Garden Square. There's not much of a garden here though. I mean, like in the middle there's like a tiny little place where shrubs are growing, and here as well mostly it's just pavement and guys skateboarding and a big metal anchor there. So this metro station here, there's another entrance to it there on the other side there. That's that end there. This metro station is called Kitai-Gorod, which literally means Chinatown. But I don't really see what's so Chinatowny about this area. I don't see one single indication of Chinese architecture or Chinese inhabitants or influence or anything. I mean, this thing here, this is not Chinese. I don't know what it is actually, but it's not Chinese, and everything else here doesn't look even remotely Chinese. So I don't know why this. If this is Moscow's Chinatown, then I don't think there's a whole lot of Chinese people here. There is, I am seeing significant amounts of, I mean, significant for Russia, significant amounts of racial diversity here. So St. Petersburg was almost exclusively white people. Here, I do not see a lot of black people. I've seen a couple. I've seen a couple of Africans, like black Africans, but there are not many of them. But there is actually a fair number of Asian-looking people. There have always been a lot of Asian-looking people in Russia because, partly because of Kazakhstan and places like that, because people from Kazakhstan look Asian. They look kind of, they have that sort of East Asian look to them. And there have always been a lot of people from Kazakhstan in Russia. Well, maybe not always, but at least in modern times there have been a lot of people from Kazakhstan in Russia because of the whole Soviet Union thing. So I do see a fair number of people here who are not, not white, European, Caucasian looking, more so than I saw in St. Petersburg. But it is still predominantly white, European looking people here, obviously. I tried leaning on this thing, but it is not well suited for leaning on. Oh, probably because it's broken here. Yeah, the weld, it was welded here and the weld broke. That's why it's wobbling like that. Anyway, so yeah, greetings from Moscow's Chinatown, which is not very Chinese at all. Just want to pause to take a moment to get a shot of that building way in the background there. I don't know if I'll make it to that building. I think that might be a university. I think that might be one of Moscow's famous scientific universities. But I'm still going in this direction because I'm going to Red Square. I'm not far from Red Square now. You really don't see it. I mean, you really don't see the... I mean, it doesn't look like there's much here. But, I mean, this just looks like a regular street. But Red Square is not far in that direction, so let's check it out. I like how the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Russian Federation has a flag with the hammer and sickle flying from it. Just kind of seems to kind of go a little bit against the idea of commerce and industry. I mean, not that I'm not against either one. I'm not against communism. I'm not against capitalism. I just think it's funny the way the Russians kind of mix them up. I don't mean mix them up as in confuse them. I mean like blend them together. Like the Russians really blend them together, just as the Chinese have done. I mean, China has become such an economic powerhouse because it's combined some of the best of capitalism with some of the best of communism, and Russia is doing the same. That's one of the reasons why Russia is doing so well on many fronts. It's a pretty nice church back there. But I'm still going towards Red Square, which is not far this way. Whoa, what are all these What are all these soldiers doing here? All those soldiers, oh, here come more of them. Are they responding to something, or are they just out for a stroll? I don't know. So I think we're finally there. I think that red wall back there, I think that is part of the walls of the Kremlin. It just, from here, it just seems kind of out of place. It's just kind of funny because, you know, here we've got a regular street, like there's some, what is that? That's like a, that's a glasses. It's an optometrist place. You can buy glasses and sunglasses there. Here, this is a parking parkovka. This is a parking garage, and then over here, oh, this is Gostiny Dvor. Oh, hey, Gostiny Dvor is what is it? I don't know what it is, but it's a big thing. I remember Gostiny Dvor is a big deal. So you got all this, you know, it looks like a fairly regular city street. I mean, the architecture here is kind of cool. Like the siding on this building is pretty nice. And then just bam, it's just like, you know, those old models of the world where the world just suddenly ends on a cliff and like all the seawater just forms a huge waterfall that falls at the end of the world. Just bam, Moscow ends here, and there's this huge red wall blocking everything. That's of course not the case, but it just looks a little bit that way from here. So this here is the entrance to GUM, which stands for I forget what it stands for. It's basically it's a big shopping center. Like GUM is one of the most famous shopping centers in Moscow, by extension in Russia. The text below there that says Krasnaya Ploshchad is it means red square. So yeah. So this is GUM on my right. And we are coming up to Red Square. Is it blocked? Did they already block it? Let me see what's going on. So, let's see what's the deal here, because I'll explain in a minute why I think it might be blocked, but I just want to see if it is in fact blocked. Yeah, it looks like, okay, it looks like they blocked it off. Darn it. I am too late to get on to Red Square, I think. But this is, yeah, there we go. So there is the world famous St. Basil's Cathedral, which many people often confuse for the Kremlin. Many people think that's the Kremlin. That is not the Kremlin. That is St. Basil's Cathedral. It's a cathedral. The Kremlin is this thing, this whole structure that goes off there. That's the Kremlin. That is a church, which happens to be next to the Kremlin, but it's not, that in itself is not the Kremlin. So you can see they've erected these fences here to block off Red Square. Why did they do that? Well, somebody warned me that this was the case, and that's why I wanted to come here today on my first day of being in Moscow. First of all, because Red Square is probably the most famous, most obvious place to go when you're in Moscow. It's like the first attraction in most people's list of things to see. But also because the 9th of May, which is in 3 days from now, is Dien Pobyedy, a day of victory on which Russians celebrate their victory in what they call the Great Patriotic War, which is the Russian name for what the West calls World War II. So yeah, was it on the 9th of May that Hitler committed suicide, or was it on the 9th of May that the Nazis capitulated? I don't know exactly what date it was, but yeah, the 9th of May is the Day of Victory celebration in Russia. That's in 3 days. And somebody had warned me that in advance of the celebration, they block off Red Square because people are going to be practicing here. This is where a whole bunch of soldiers and a whole bunch of military hardware are going to be parading around 3 days from now on May 9th. And so I was warned that if you want to go on to Red Square, you should go there as soon as possible, because it might be closed already by the time you get there. Well, it looks like I'm too late. It looks like It looks like they might have just closed it because I'm seeing, I saw some people coming off it just, actually there are still some people there. There are people back there, so, yeah, there we go. Do they work here? Like, are they working as part of the Victory Day celebration, or are they just stragglers who, I don't know. I don't know the story. I could probably, if I really wanted to go there, I could probably jump over this fence and say I'm on Red Square, but I think, I think that is not a wise course of action. That would not be the wisest way to get onto Red Square. It looks like I'm going to have to miss it, but I mean, you know, I can see everything from here. I mean, I'm not actually on Red Square. I'm just across the street from it. But I can see everything. I can see the Kremlin from here. I can see that that church back there. I can see this building, whatever it is. I don't actually. Is that the old? Is that the old KGB office? I think the old KGB headquarters is somewhere around here. I thought it looked like that. Maybe that's what that is. And then obviously St. Basil's Cathedral, which is probably the single most famous building in all of Moscow. They really make it look quite nice. It really has a nice... it looks pretty cool. It reminds me a lot of the famous cathedral on the spilled blood in St. Petersburg. They have a very similar appearance, but they are obviously different buildings. Not least because this is in Moscow and the other one's in St. Petersburg. But anyway, all right, well, I won't be able to get on to Red Square and see all the usual hip and happening stuff that's going on there. That's a little, you could say it's a little bit of a bum out, but I guess it's not that bad because, again, you know, I'm here, I can see everything that's there. So, yeah, and then on the other side of the street, just a regular city. Just got this building thing, whatever it is, and there's GUM. There's GUM, the big shopping mall over there, and the city just continues on its merry way. So yeah, Red Square, Kremlin, St. Basil's Cathedral, bunch of people getting ready for Dien Pobedi. I guess that's it. I guess that's all. I guess that's all we're getting here at this trip. Oh well, it's not that bad. I mean, I haven't really missed anything. I can still see everything that I wanted to see from here, so it's all cool. It's all cool, bro. This is the entrance to Biblioglobus, one of the preeminent bookstores in Moscow. I don't think they would let me shoot a video inside the store. I guess I gotta ask, but probably better not. It's huge. This bookstore inside is like, the bookstore itself is like the size of a whole city. I mean, I guess it's just the size of this city block, but there are probably cities that are smaller than this bookstore. It's not necessarily very beautiful. It's a little disorganized. It kind of has the feel of a warehouse inside. Like they've really just stacked heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of books upon each other, and not really gone too crazy with the decorations. It's kind of funny. Here on the outside, it looks nice. Here on the outside, they've created nice little sort of murals like this. But on the inside, it just looks like, it feels like a warehouse that somebody just filled with books, which is pretty much what it is. But if you like a lot of books, like really very much a lot of books, then this is definitely a place to check out. Biblioglobus.